Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
So, welcome everyone to Do You Ever Wonder? And in the world of podcasting, I am a very lucky man because I have, for you racing fans out there, I've hit the daily double. I had the opportunity to speak with Bob Knakal about a month ago, and today I get to speak with another commercial real estate legend, Paul Massey. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Michael. Really great to be here with you today.
Well, I appreciate it. So now, you and Bob actually started together at CBRE. He tells the story that he thought he was applying to a bank.
Yeah.
How did how did you end up at CBRE?
But by luck, and Bob, that's a true story. Bob was at Penn, and everyone thought they needed to be a banker. I was involved with my fraternity in college. I went to Colgate in upstate, and there was an alum who was supposed to come around a couple of times a year and make sure we weren't burning the house down. And he was a CBRE national accounts officer, and he got me a summer job and at CB in my hometown of Boston. And actually, Bob Knakal was the same way. He ended up working at CBRE in his hometown of in northern New Jersey in Hackensack. And so we didn't know each other, but we had this very similar modest upbringing. Ended up at CB by accident, and it was a great experience. And then both of us started in New York City around the same time just as we were getting out of school.
That's phenomenal. Kismet, right? The
Completely.
Yeah,
it was even a little more. We when I got done with school, I was really a terrible student, so I wasn't getting the Goldman Sachs nod or Morgan Stanley or one of the banks. So when I saw how great CB was as a summer intern, I went running back there when I got out of school, and the boss of that office said, I've got one opening. It's a mature office. I'm not rolling the dice. I'm a college kid. So I went back to my fraternity connection, and he said, well, that's the bad news. The good news is we're brand new in New York City, so they'll take anybody there. And
vote of confidence.
My grand plan was 6 months, 9 months in New York, impress them and convince them to send me back and give me the job I really wanted in Boston. But it didn't take long before New York had its hooks in me, and I fell in love and would never leave, and it was great.
So, and you and Bob teamed up.
Yeah, I was there a little ahead of him. I'm a year older. So I was in the research group there. And then he showed up just at the same time that they were looking for someone to volunteer to do investment sales. And he and I were the youngest two there. And we figured there were probably 40 leasing brokers there, and we were the youngest by far. So we said, if we do this investment sales thing, we'll differentiate ourselves. And you would have thought New York was institutional and organized, but it was the Wild West. So the niche that we focused on was really a big opportunity.
So everything lined up pretty well. And then,
yes.
Then in '88, you guys had the stones to go out and start your own firm.
Too young to know any better, probably, is a better characterization. But we were stubborn and thought, we played on the back of napkins for well over a year about what our budget was going to be and revenue. And we left. He was, I think he was 27, I was 28. And, we had 26 fantastic years from there.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And you guys basically there were no lawyers, or maybe there were at some point, but you guys pretty much worked together on a handshake, right?
Yeah, we had a one pager that some lawyer, some friend of ours in Long Island cooked up. I think it was a simple buy-sell agreement, but I don't think either one of us ever read it again. But we did the handshake, and it worked out perfectly. I think part of it was we were from the same place, figuratively, but we also grew into liking different parts of the business. I like the day-to-day management, and he was our top salesman by far. So he, I would leave him alone, and I'd update him about what was happening on the day-to-day stuff once a week. And most of the time he was tapping his feet and couldn't stand it and wanted to get out of the room.
Well,
But the yin yang really worked.
so I opened up my company with my wife, and
Hmm.
she's great at the indoor, the books,
Hmm.
the stuff that takes a lot of attention to detail. And
Hmm.
I'm not good at that stuff. I'm more on the sales side. So
Hmm.
much like your guys' relationship, that's how we work together. We've been married 36 years, and you guys were together for 26 years.
Hmm.
The way that you formed your relationship, I was going to ask you, do you think in this day and age, do those kinds of things work anymore, where two people can just come together, decide to do something, and not have to bring in all kinds of oversight?
Yeah, absolutely it can happen. It is like a marriage, and I often think if we hadn't focused on, you know, generally different parts of the business. I mean, I like selling. I had a client base that was pretty fantastic. But he was the monster in that space, and in a good way. And but I think it is like a marriage. If you're not growing, and if you're not growing in a complementary direction together as people, then you're going to run into the same problems that you might in a personal relationship.
Right. So I was going to ask you at some point, how 26 years is a long time. People tend to get tired of each other. You know, issues come up, little fights arise, but it sounds like, much like in my situation, if you're focused in different areas, then that complementary thing is really the key to really the longevity.
Well, Bob, the thing I had going for me, the lucky thing for me, was that Bob's some combination of Dale Carnegie and Abe Lincoln, where it's never criticize, condemn, or complain. And the stories about how many generals Abe Lincoln had to fire before he got control of the Civil War were famous. But another famous part of that story was his desk was stuffed with scathing, criticizing letters that he never sent his generals. So, because he couldn't bear to hurt people's feelings. Bob was exactly like that. He never would criticize me, never said anything, which I wouldn't have responded well to. But he was 100% supportive all the time, and that really felt great for me. I felt like, I had his support, he had mine, and
Yeah.
so that was a nice thing. We squabbled once when in 2007 one of our national competitors wanted to buy our company, and I wasn't up for it. And we had a brief moment of I'll buy you out, you buy me out. And then 2008 came, and we realized, with the help of our accountants and lawyers, that would have been a terrible mistake for both of us.
Right.
But we put the genie back in the bottle and ran the company another 7 years together. And by the way, we had other partners at the firm who were fantastic people. We had a great management team, a great CFO who is one of my best friends from college, Mike Walodi, and just a great group. So it was all about the team. So we had a good experience.
That's great. And you know what they always say, there's no I in team. But I know that you were, something about your background fascinated me because I've been involved with it a little bit myself. You were probably more involved, but you were an amateur boxer.
Hmm.
Where and are you still?
Yeah, so I've always had I've always tried to keep in shape, and it always had to be a game. The game was typically some form of martial arts or boxing. I did I did a long time where in Taekwondo. I'm a third degree black belt in Taekwondo,
Wow.
and that was fantastic because 3 or 4 times a week I'd get a workout in. A lot of times in the middle of the day, so I'd be refreshed and could eat all the terrible food I like to eat.
Right.
And then the owner of that karate dojo retired, and I was looking for something to do. So I ended up at a boxing gym called Mendez, which is kind of one of the big popular gyms in New York City on 26 and Madison. And I was there probably 15 years, and I had a blast. And the culture of that gym was fantastic. And this stuff becomes social as well as
Absolutely.
the So I don't know where you worked out or how involved you were, but Mendez was a great place.
Well, I was a bellhop at Grossinger's in the
Ah.
70s. That was when the boxers trained in the Catskills. And
Hmm.
I was part of a boxing gym near Grossinger's. I actually met
Hmm.
Larry Holmes at Grossinger's.
Wow.
And I use that more of a workout. I always tell people I'm in groups where they say, what's one thing nobody knows about you? And actually, for me, it's I retired undefeated as an amateur boxer. I was 1-0. And there's a thing on Long Island called the Long Island Fight for Charity, where businessmen train, raise money, and then at the Long Island Hilton, you have a ring, like legit, with 1,200 people watch. It was great. So
Hmm.
that's my claim to fame. But there's no better workout
It's a
than
great sport.
absolutely, absolutely.
Lately Francisco Mendez passed away. Unfortunately, he had COVID. Early days, so the gym closed. So I found my way to a new thing, which is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I wrestled in school, so there's similarity, and I've been doing that for about a year, and it's the same old thing. It's a fantastic gym. It's run by a great kind of world famous jiu-jitsu specialist, and I'm getting the workout that I love, and it's a great culture, and so there's a new thing for me now, and I'm really embracing it.
That's great. You know what? Although you're a young guy, as we get older, it's it's important to find things that retain your attention to stay in shape because it's
Yeah, it makes me feel good. It's every time I walk in there, like old guy keeps showing up, and I get respect for that.
that's right. No question about it. So you guys, you were bought out,
Hmm.
and in 18 you started B6.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? How'd you know who you wanted to come along with you?
Well, going back to the Cushman acquisition, I was pretty open about the fact that there was a part of me that didn't want to do that, and and they appreciated the transparency. So everyone knew I was going to last my contract, but probably unlikely past that. And so when our contracts were up, I was jonesing for a part of the business that I was missing, which was really like being a coach and making our own mistakes. And the business probably had changed a bit, and we were focused on different aspects. So we're not building the exact same thing. I don't think you can go home, but I think the market's changed, the world's changed, the business is going to morph. There's going to be more data, more transparency. So we have I started that business with Mike Willody, who I mentioned earlier, who was the CFO of Massey Knakal, and we attracted a great group of some of our veterans, but also a great group of people younger in their career, and you catch them when they've got a little bit of experience and they're ready to take it to the next level.
Right.
And those people are a big part of the satisfaction for me, because we don't think you can make someone's career. They kind of have to make it themselves, but you can have a hand in a career, and it's very gratifying. It's like, I equate it to the Yankees, which I'm not a huge sports fan, but I always thought it was great that Jeter, A-Rod, they had Joe Torre as their coach, and I think everyone needs a coach. And I'd like to think that at some point, if I continue and do well, that that people might look back and say he was a little bit like Joe Torre.
That's okay, as long as they say you're handsomer.
Yeah, he's
So you
a
guys
great.
have, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nah, he's a great man.
I don't know him. So you know him.
He lived near us in Westchester, where we brought the kids up. Yeah.
That's great. No, he seemed like a good guy. So you guys have something called the Advanced Broker Ecosystem at B6. What
Mhm.
exactly? That's an all-encompassing program?
Yeah, no, it's just, how do you support your people? With throughout our whole career, we probably had, and I'm not lacking humility. I just, it's a conscious decision. We try and have the best support for the agents, from basic stuff to health benefits that aren't typical in the business, dedicated management, dedicated marketing team, but also technology. We have Adrian Mercado, who's our COO, used to be the CIO at Massey Knakal. He's developed a customized software system that lets us all share data about every owner in the city.
Wow.
And that data is power.
Oh, yeah.
And it really benefits the clients, because if we know everything about every market and can share that information between our teams, the teams each focus on a sub-market. All that information about what they're doing with who and where is available to everyone in the company. And it's just really a philosophy of dedication to as much technology as we can that makes our agents earn more money. Yeah.
Well, knowledge is power, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No question about it. And, we try and do some of the same. I mean, that's a much more sophisticated program than we have for title insurance, but that's phenomenal. So now, with COVID, with back to work issues and all of that, if you had as a mentor, if you had to tell a new commercial real estate broker some advice in terms of work ethic, in terms of always showing up, in terms of always being out there, what kind of advice would you give to someone?
Well, there are people on both sides of this now. I'm far right leaning about show up at the office. I think Ken Griffith with Citadel was fantastic a few weeks ago, where he said, we had our best year ever in 2022. We made $20 billion. And it's because everyone came to the office, which I loved. And Elon Musk is an acquired taste, but let them go pretend to work somewhere else line. I think a lot of really talented CEOs believe we should all be together and work together. That's big advice.
I mean, the reality is, when I started in 1984 at Lehman Brothers, you learned from other people in the office. You could ask questions to other people. People mentored you.
Mm-hmm.
The political game, I mean, you can't do that on Zoom. You can't do any of it on Zoom. And, to have young brokers who are trying to learn learn how to succeed on video is very difficult.
Yeah, I've got one of my kids who doesn't think I'm 100% right in this topic, and she's very successful in the fashion business. but it, doesn't really think, well, anyway, we debate this back and forth.
Debate's good. I have my oldest daughter and I, let's call it debate often. That's a good word for it. Uh, so New York City, what do you think of, we have the 2019 Act, and
Mhm.
now we've got 421A that's kind of, being bandied about, and for multifamily, you've got good cause eviction that is also being bandied about. What is the how do you think it's going to all play out in terms of the fight between landlords and tenants
Um,
and legislation?
yeah, I think it all kind of goes back to um, our politicians, uh, in a well-meaning way, wanted to protect and help people who are struggling in
Yep.
an environment where you've got a housing shortage. And what they did was, you referenced the rent regulation of 2019, the new laws, Democratic control, Assembly and Senate in Albany flipped to Democratic control. And they enacted laws that basically said you can't raise your rents, and you can't fix up apartments, and pass the expense through to the tenants in any way, which destroyed the multifamily market overnight. In a single day, valuations probably went down 35 to 40%, and that's a conservative statement. And then good cause eviction is another, massive uncertainty. 421A was a state and city program that allowed for tax abatements to create more housing, which of course, if you increase supply, you're going to help with that shortage and probably lower rents and make things more reasonable for those people who are struggling.
Right.
And but what the unintended net consequence of all those regulations was that the massive number of rent regulated apartment buildings in New York have diminished values, assessments plummeting. But what people really didn't focus on is the city's got a $101 billion budget, the city of New York, and 45% of that budget comes directly from revenue on real estate taxes from properties like those. And what the city and the state have done is killed the golden goose.
Right.
So when you have the net result of your regulation being that you're going to have budget shortfalls of $5 to $10 billion, the city doesn't have a lot of variability in its budget between bond payments, retiree benefit payments, payroll. So the first thing that's going to get cut are social programs. So there you are, directly hurting the people that you were intending to try and help. So I think we need to lighten up on the regulation on the rents, let the free market create housing. 421A tax programs incent developers to build more housing. Taking that kind of uniform program away puts complete uncertainty into any multifamily development project, because then it becomes a one-off negotiation with the city, which the de Blasio administration was famous for. But that kind of one-off development, your lender can't really be sure of what it is you're going to be able to build. Your equity partners can't be sure of what it is you're going to build. Your architect won't know. It's not tenable to have every development in a city this size be a one-off, negotiation. You end up like Boston, where there's no as of right. But Boston is a small, wonderful town that's got all kinds of constraints on growth. We need way more growth here, so we need to put back in place some kind of a program. And I sense the governor is for that. It'll be a political battle, but we need a uniform program. New York City has a uniform zoning code that has been in place since 1962, where everyone knows what they can build, where they can build, how they can build. And it's an amazing thing. It's almost a living thing. So in a city where you've got a zoning blanket that's really, really great and has operated successfully for years, all you have to do is put a development tax abatement program on top of that, and you'll see housing created in a great way, and you'll see people who are struggling paying less rent.
Well, I think what you're describing is common sense government, and the legislation in 2019, the debate over 421A, that ostensibly they were all for the benefit of the tenant.
Right.
But as always, nobody seems to have thought out that the unintended consequence of not being able to do renovations in your building, or of not letting people raise rents so they warehouse apartments and rents just keep going up. I think people, including politicians, just need to think a little bit more.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, if you think about it, the old business plan in New York City used to be, I'm going to pay a 4 or 5% capitalization rate. Whatever you'd pay, whatever equated to a 4 or 5% return to you at that time. You'd work the building to the point of legally and legitimately raising rents, where your net return to yourself was an 8% return, which Warren Buffett says 8% is compounded is the most powerful thing in the world. And then you could put the property away, put it on the shelf, refinance out of it. It went from buying at a 4 or 5 and driving the return to an 8 to now buying at a 7 or maybe an 8, and with no revenue increases and plenty of inflationary pressures, you're now driving your net return down back to a 4. Who buys that? What's that worth?
100%. And I think we're running out of time, but another issue that I wanted to touch on was all of the commercial real estate loans that are going to be hitting the market, and the amount of buildings that are not going to make it, the B and C office buildings, the people who have to refinance and now have to pony up because cap rates are up, interest rates are up, their NOI is down, and now they have to come in with 300 grand out of their pocket just to get to the LTV they want, and it's going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah, I mean, we banked with Signature for years. We think they're great talented people. I think this whole thing is tremendously unfortunate, but you've got a major player who just exited the market.
Absolutely.
So that there's going to be a lot of pressure from that and a lot of adjustment. Maybe if we were in some form of a real estate recession, this will quicken the pace, and maybe the road to recovery will be faster. But there'll be a lot of things that need to be adjusted to stabilize the city.
100%. And we've been in this kind of unknown area for a little while, and I'm afraid it's going to go on for some time more. But I guess that remains to be seen.
Kind of feels like 2010. Feels like there's a feeling in our company that as the year plays out, we're going to see more activity because there's been so little for so long.
Right.
And people have to move on with their life. Estates need to be settled. Partnerships need to wrap up. People need to retire. So those people have been kicking the can between rent regs, COVID, and now interest rates. They won't kick the can much longer. So I think you're going to see a velocity uptick in the area where we work as 23 plays out.
From your mouth to God's ears, Paul. But I got to tell you, you're a pleasure to talk to. You're a great guy, and obviously incredibly successful. And
well, grateful to you, Michael, for doing this, and you're bringing us together with your show and with your work. And I know your work with veterans and your charitable endeavors are meaningful too. So we think you're a great guy too, and it was really fun to be here with you today.
Terrific, and I hope to have you back.
Thanks, gladly.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.